Okay, so next, we're going to move on to what we consider to be 10 warning signs that a school committee is in trouble. So this information was pulled from that other book that I had mentioned to you previously. And I'm sorry, but the information in your books don't really follow because of, I guess there was a photocopy issue when they were put together. But the stuff is all in sequence on our website, so feel free to get it there. So just relax and pay attention to what we're talking about. So number 1 and 2, engaging in partisan voting as opposed to engaging on what's best for kids. Marianne?
So
the second one she also disagrees with.
no. I think, again, I think it's what you do and how you do it in number 2. On more times than not, I am in the minority in voting on my school committee. But, for example, if I vote against something, I'm going to stand behind the vote. But if once something passes, I'm not going to go out and try to sabotage it. So, for example, if there's a majority vote to close the school, I'm not going to be in favor of it, and I'm certainly not going to publicly support it, but I'm not going to go sabotaging it. And once it's done, I'm not going to tell everybody for the next 2 years that this was a bad decision. So you've got to be real careful. I mean, again, we're elected by the voters. They elect us because of who we are and what we stand for. If we disagree with something, that's how we vote. And if we want to let everybody know that's how we voted, I think that's what we need to do. But I don't think we sabotage a vote that takes place. For example, let's say there's going to be a later slide. Let's say your superintendent gets hired on a 5-4 vote. And I'm one of the 4 that votes against the superintendent. Well, I'm not going to tell him that for the next 2 years. You know, he's there. I'm stuck. He's got a contract. I owe a lot of money if I try to get rid of him now. So, again, everybody can know how I voted, but I'm not going to sabotage the vote.
Next, responding...
Wait, Eva. Joe, Eva.
A question?
Yes, suppose that vote, you know, is a violation of state law.
All right, so let's talk. All right, that's a different question. Okay. So now, one of the questions that Joe Eva said, what if a vote is taken, a majority vote is taken, and that vote breaks the law? Everybody's got a problem, okay? So let me give you an example. Let's say I'm not representing a committee on this, and a committee makes a decision that they are going to fire the high school principal without a recommendation of the school committee. I mean, without a recommendation of the superintendent. That's a violation of the law. Only the superintendent can recommend a hiring or firing. So a school committee can't do that, and they happen to do it on a 5-4 vote. At that point, the superintendent can go to RIDE and RIDE. There have been superintendents in the past that have gone to RIDE. Years and years ago, there was a Warwick superintendent where school committee, there was an issue about, about reorganizing principals. And there was a very clear RIDE decision that that's the job of the superintendent. So there's case law out there that supports that a school committee can't do this, only a superintendent can do it. Hopefully, the school committee that made the stupid mistake will find out about it and do something to correct it. Or at least they'll ask legal advice, and the legal advice will be given so that they better fix it and not do something so stupid. But if you're a committee member that knows that they did something wrong, obviously you've got to voice that in the public because you can't let that go on. It's an illegal vote. It has no weight. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Another disastrous action the school committee takes is when you vote or you move forward on an issue just because there's community discontent, but you don't attach any process to it to make sure that what you're doing is appropriate, and you haven't paid attention or gotten the data to make sure that the community is correct. So it's really important not to move forward on something until those 2 pieces happen. So you want to do something right away because somebody's complained at a school committee meeting. I had a situation a while ago where a woman stood up and she said, there's a terrible situation at this elementary school. There's a hole in the fence and the kindergartners are running out during the course of the day and they can run right into the street. And a school committee member said, oh my God, we have to fix that. I move we replace the fence, which by the way costs $25,000. Another person seconded that, and within 5 seconds, the school committee had spent something that was unbudgeted, wasn't on their agenda to vote on, and had no data. They didn't even know if it was true. Turned out there was a hole in the fence. The hole wasn't big enough for a human being to get through, maybe a small dog. And they kept the TA at that fence, and it was slated to be repaired in the following year after other priorities were taken care of. That was precisely the wrong action to take as a school committee member at that meeting, right?
And again, we'll be at school committee meetings and like 5 or 6 people will complain about something, but you've got 500 kids in that school. So are we going to listen to just those 5 or 6 people? So we've got to be careful, again, that we have the data to support some of the things that go on.
So these other two really are offshoots from number 3, conducting your own research and assuming that you can become an educational expert by Googling stuff. You have a superintendent and an assistant superintendent that can provide you with important resources to look at, let you know what leading ideas are. You really need to rely on them in the first instance at least. You may determine ultimately that they're wrong, but don't go out there and think that you can become an expert in an area, because it just doesn't work. You can't consume and process that much information in a particular area, especially complicated ones. Let your superintendent do that work and then determine whether or not he or she did a good job for you.
Now, going back to the fence problem, the right way to handle it would be at the meeting to say to your superintendent, could you please have one of your administrators go out and check this out and bring a report to us at the next meeting?
Exactly.
That way you're getting the data and you're finding out what the truth of the situation is.
Another way that you get into trouble in school committee, you know there's an issue out there and you know what the answer to that issue is. And you want the school committee to move in a particular direction on it, whatever the issue is. But you haven't taken into account what the community feels about that. And when you act in a certain way, you may inflame so much of the community that you've destroyed all the other good work that you've done, or the reputation of the school committee. So even though you want to move in the right direction, you have to be strategic about how you do that to make sure you can. And a lot of times it's about educating the community along the way, or waiting until the right time. Mary Ann?
Okay, number 7, I think we've talked about this over and over again. You as a school committee member have to support any policies. Now, if you don't like the policies, change the policies. You are the policy makers of the district. School, that's your job. You develop policy. If there's a policy you don't like, then bring it in front of the committee, and if you get a majority, you can change it. But until it's changed, you need to follow it.
So we've seen, to give you a good example, probably 100 cases where a school committee passes a policy as to when a child can go to kindergarten, what age. And then his best friend or one of his constituents has a kid who's a genius and wants to get into school, but the kid is maybe 6 months before the age cutoff that you've established in policy. And all of a sudden that school committee person is advocating to try to get that kid into the school district, when you probably had a hand in that policy to begin with. It's not appropriate to do that in that way. Maybe you need to have a discussion about whether you need a different policy, right? But you shouldn't violate policies that your own body has created. You should seek to change them.
We see a lot of policies, like a lot of school districts in the past have passed policies. They pass them through their drug and substance abuse committees, where if a child is at a party and the child gets caught drinking, then they're not allowed to be in social activities in the school department. I personally am against those policies because I think that's a parent's role, not a member of the school department's role. But having said that, school committees have those policies, and then they turn around and their best friend or their own child violates the policy, and now what are we going to do? You follow a policy unless you change the policy. But it's your job and your obligation and your responsibility. If you don't like the policy, change the policies.
Number 9, I think, is one that Mary Ann and I disagree on. When a majority of the school committee has made it clear that they want to select a certain applicant as superintendent, makes a lot of sense for the school committee to vote for that superintendent unanimously, so you can get that superintendent off to a good start publicly and not show that there's some immediate division in that school district.
I disagree.
And number 10, I'm not sure you disagree with this or not, but failing to personally detach from board decisions. and that's an offshoot of the one we spoke about before. Once a decision has been made, really follow it and move forward at that point. Don't bring up every single school committee thereafter the same issues that the committee's already decided, or the committee will never be able to move forward. You'll never be able to make progress in your district. So your goal should be, how do I persuade my other school committee members to move somehow towards my direction? And if they can, maybe I can get half or a quarter of what I've wanted. But if you have the type of personality that it's all of what I want, or I'm going to burn the town down every time, you really don't belong on a committee.